webinar today. This is Bill Baker, and we appreciate you to break away from looking out your window to see how the storm is coming along for this webinar that's co-sponsored and underwritten by the Georgia Independent Association. Georgia Independent Association, whatever. Candy, you're going to have to tell us what it is.
I'll get to you there. Please,
I have trouble with that title.
Candy, I think we need to work with Bill here a little bit. Yeah, I think so.
Good morning, everyone. This is Candy Lau, Vice President with the Georgia Independent School Association. And we are so happy to have you join us today for this webinar and with Firestorm. And everybody that is here, hopefully you're not, about to be snowed in. I hope I'm not. So thank you again, Firestorm, and we're ready to go. Bill and Jim.
All right, so Bill, let's go back and pick up, since you've now learned how to say Georgia Independent School Association. That we're on the internet, both on Twitter and Facebook, and everybody sees those hashtags there and the contact, and look forward to linking to you. By the way, we do these webinars live, and if you ever wanted proof of it, you've certainly seen it this morning. I'll do the disclaimer, Bill, and just kind of keep it rolling as we move along.
All right, sir.
Obviously, today's webinar, you need to look at the slide deck along with the oral commentary to really process it, and it's not a plan. That's something that you need to work out. And as the disclaimer says, today is not legal advice. What we're going to focus on is the why, what, and how do you test your plan. And it's really consistent in tying in with our earlier themes around time when it matters most, because if your people don't know what to do when time really matters, it's going to make a difference. And the best way to understand that is conducting tests. You've already heard from Candy, and Candy, I know we're all anxious about the snow and the ice today as it goes across. I'm down in South Georgia today, down in the St. Simons area, and we're getting Savannah TV, and they're concerned about a ½ inch ice and snow on top. So it's going to be a little bit of an exciting day for them as the day progresses. And it's underwritten by the Georgia Independent School Association. And, Candy, anything you want to say about the association? And you've got a big event coming up, I think, this week, in the next couple of weeks.
Nothing really. I think everybody on board, they're member schools, so they have an idea of who we are and what we do. And we're just so grateful to Firestorm. We've had such good interaction with this and so much good positive feedback. And I think as things play out, people realize what planning ahead means. And I think the incident that happened at the mall a week ago, and they were talking about how they had just gone through training with all the people in the stores and all, and it could have been a lot worse than what it was. So I think that we know that what y'all are doing is needed, and we're very appreciative of being involved with Firestorm.
And you've got a head of school meeting coming up soon, don't you?
Yes, we do, on Thursday. And we're hoping that we get to have it.
Well, I've got my fingers crossed, and we're knocking on wood that all those things will come together, and it'll be well. So everyone, I know you're looking at when you keep your schools open and closed today, and so we'll keep this moving along and cover the topics. What we have focused on is really transforming crisis into value and empowering you to make those decisions. Today we wanted to give you a quick update, and Candy already mentioned some of those things that have been going on around the country. We continue, unfortunately, to have shootings in schools. We've been active in helping the Arapahoe School in Littleton, Colorado, as well as the Roswell School in New Mexico for the events that were around it. We had the shooting just last week at Purdue with the teacher there, the student teacher killed. We also had yesterday a student pour flammable liquid over himself and set himself on fire in Columbine, not in the Jefferson County school system, which is the one where Columbine is. Knowing that these events happen, and he had threatened suicide, and others were aware and brought that to school in the cafeteria, we live in a different world today, and monitoring and understanding become absolutely critical, and the role that social media plays in that will be a key element. We'll do a webinar a little later this year around that particular topic and what you need to look for. We had the shooting at the movie theater just over the last few weeks. So the events there, the mall in Maryland, communicable illness, we've all been tracking what's been happening with the cruise ship. They went from 300 people ill now to over 600 people, and there's certainly a forecast that the swine flu will be back this year as a pandemic. So looking at our communicable illness policies will be a factor. And I also listed here Freedom Industries. That's the water pollution up in West Virginia that occurred. And that clearly impacted not only the businesses there, but the schools and the families. So we're facing a wide range of activities that affect all of our schools. Our goal is really to make preparedness simple. So we're focused on simplifying preparedness. And when you think about our students, there are a lot of dangers and exposures behind them that can have a direct impact. And what we want to do today is to focus to make sure we're ready to deal with those types of events. And that's where the aspect of testing your plans makes a difference. So when emergencies happen, will you be ready? Will your employees be ready? Your teachers, your faculty, and your staff? What will you do? Where will you go? What will you say? What do you need? That's really the reason why you want to go through and test your plans. We'll share with you some more details around it. Now, when you think about testing of plans, you're doing that to identify weaknesses. We would much rather have something fail or not work the way you want it to when we're doing a test as opposed to a live event that would occur. We also want to simulate changes that could happen in your school in other events that are occurring so that you can respond appropriately at that point in time. We also want to locate errors. So when someone makes the wrong decision, sends the wrong message, doesn't follow in, doesn't report, and ties those areas together, that's the reason why we would test. It also provides us insights into how people are likely to react and to make decisions when we need them to really focus. It gets a buy-in across the entire school so that this is really a culture of preparedness that we're focused on. And then as we learn these lessons, we'll go back and update our plans, update our trainings, and do follow-up exercises in those areas. So that's why we test our plans as we go forward. Now, when we do this, we gain a lot of benefits. Practice makes a difference. Candy cited out that the mall up in Maryland talked about they had a difference because they had drills, that they had steps that they had gone through and carried forward. Basketball teams, football teams, your sports teams practice and drill so that when those events occur in the game, they know what to do and how to react. And the same thing is true with a crisis or a disaster. So it familiarizes everyone with the vulnerabilities, the impacts. It allows us then to know the problems or weaknesses before it's critical. No one's hurt in an exercise. In a real event, it could be a different. So as we go through, we want to factor all of those things back into the benefits. The reason this is really critical is that in the first 24 hours, in any disaster or crisis, most everything we learn is wrong. So you're going to be making decisions in a live event based upon incorrect or partial information at those points. This is why the test and the drills become so very, very critical to us as we move forward and work in those areas. So as we focus on an exercise, what I would like you to do and think about it each step along the way as you have an escalation in events, as you go through, these are the types of questions that you want to make sure that your faculty and staff and those that are on your incident response team or those that are on your crisis management team have focused on. What's changed at each escalation or intervention in your test? What do you know? Not what you think, but what is it that you know? We want to make sure that we're making decisions based on facts. Are you concerned? If so, what is it that you're concerned about? And what is, in fact, your plan? And your plan can be at each step along the way as in addition to your overall plan. You've got a framework that all of these things fit in. What we're looking at, though, in the escalations as an event occurs, that you're going to be looking at what's happening next, making steps to mitigate those impacts. And then you continually monitor because things are changing. It's a dynamic situation. And in the previous slide, we talked about everything you're learning is wrong early on in a crisis. That's why you have to monitor and then adjust your actions as you go through. And then finally, what's your message? What are you going to say to your students? What are you saying to the parents? What are you sharing with the public or first responders? So an exercise focuses participants on these questions as you go through and look at each of the individual areas. Now, when we have an exercise, it allows the management, it allows the head of the school or the principal to use and access the plans and procedures to assess and measure the degree to which everyone understands those processes, and it enhances the coordinations, communications, identifies the areas of improvement, and increases the ability of management and staff to respond to emergencies. I'm using the term here management because we're talking about crisis management. I know we're an educational group. I know we're focused on education, and that's important. But when these events happen, we are managing how our school responds, how our students respond, how our teachers respond, how our staff responds in those areas. So as we think through this process, this is a management exercise to test the plans and to carry forward. So the scope and objectives we're looking at, we don't want to jeopardize the school day. We don't want to take away from what we're trying to do to move forward. I also recommend that you work on it to increase complexity. So you start out with a very simple exercise, and then the next time you do, you add a little more complexity to it. You change the participation functions, the physical locations involved. Examples of that might be you do a regular fire drill, and that's normal and expected. Then we could combine that with another event that was occurring. If you do a lockdown drill or an armed intruder drill, you probably are focusing on that particular exercise with everyone in the school, in their classrooms. Do one of those drills unannounced. That increases the level of complexity. Do one of those drills where there's a large number of students out on the sports fields so that they then find a different set of reactions to carry forward and move along in those directions. So changing these factors changes the response within each group as we go forward. You really are looking at these types of objectives, and if you're going to do an announced test, let them know what your objectives and goals are. And I'm going to show you a couple of sample exercises toward the end of our conversation today to give you an idea of how you'd set those goals and objectives. Expectations should be realistic. A generic scenario that can indicate what could happen. You don't want to get too complex too quickly because right now it's learning the basics. The first time you went out to play golf or tennis or baseball, you were working on kind of the fundamentals in those sports to learn those activities. The same thing will be true with the exercises that we're doing around our plans, around our response, around our preparedness. There should be one or two threats in the exercise. We're not going to test 10 things at once. We really are looking at a couple of things occurring and then level those activities as we move forward. So this slide really frames those expectations. Now, the types of exercises and tests you do vary, and we'll go through an overview of what those are and give you an idea. The first is what you would want to do each year at the start of the school year, and that's a walkthrough orientation. Get your team together, talk with them, and go through your plan. You would talk about it, and you would prepare for it. So this could be at the start of the school year. If you didn't do it then, no reason why you can't do it now, but it's a great way to begin by walking through your plan, describing things and how they would occur, and making sure everyone understands it. That type of a plan walkthrough is generally an hour to an hour and a half, and I would then add a scenario that you might want them to think about after you've done the walkthrough of the plan. So this is a very low threat, a very low pressure, very low stress, but it's a great way to make sure that everybody understands it. Now, you may feel like we sent everybody the plan, they read it, they understand it. Getting the plan and understanding the plan are two different things. So stepping them through this walkthrough really creates the understanding that they need to have. Once that's been done, you can later schedule a drill. This could be a month later or 2 months later, and it could be very short time, like a fire drill that would occur, or a tornado drill, and you would cycle that out. Make a plan of when you're going to do it, have it on your schedule, and then conduct the drill. These types of drills could be done announced that we're going to do a fire drill, or unannounced. You'll learn more in an unannounced drill than you will in one that's pre-identified. Many of the schools that we've been speaking with over last year and this year do the majority of their drills on an announced basis. I would encourage you to do some on an unannounced basis to see the reactions and see what happens. By the way, this would be also an opportunity to coordinate with your local first responders, fire and police, have them there to observe and obtain any observations that they can share with you about what you want to do and would need to do going forward. The next level above a drill is a tabletop. This would be where you would get your emergency response team or your crisis management team together, or you could do it with a faculty meeting where you've got everyone together and you step through a scenario that would take place in the school and have a series of escalations that would occur within it, and then break the group into smaller groups and ask them what they would be doing at each step. What would they be concerned about? What would they be monitoring? What actions would they be taking? What messages would they be communicating? Generally, in doing that type of an exercise, it's about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. As it's shown here, I've done this up to 2.5 hours. Half a day is about all that you want to make that run. You do not want to go beyond that in responding. In the extra 30 minutes, adding into that is a walkthrough. What did you learn? What worked well? What didn't work well? As you do that debriefing in the process, and I'll give you some notes about that aspect as we go forward. So we've done walkthrough, we've done drill, we've done tabletop. Next will become a functional one, where you want to test some aspect of what you're doing here. It's more detailed and it's more focused associated with it. This could involve the sending out of text messages with your ability to send notifications. Could be in coordinating some of your emergency response from a medical standpoint. And you could be coordinating with an outside party associated with it. And then carrying it all the way then would be a full scale. This would be where you would be involving the fire, the police, in putting it together. And this is a much more complex cycle in planning and getting it done. Now, I don't expect you in a school environment to do an 8-hour exercise, but I do think that you can do a full-scale one at least once in the year so that you get the feeling of the response and the coordination with outside agencies. In that event, it might only be half an hour where the students are involved, but the leadership in the school could be involved in it on a little longer basis. So those are the types of exercises and tests that are done within schools and, in fact, all types of businesses across the country. Start small, move up to more complex, and then have increasing interventions in it. Now, the follow-up that's done after you've done an exercise in an event would you see on the screen. What you want to do is to have everyone come together and talk about what worked as you would move through it. Take some pictures that you could show of what it looked like when the school was evacuated and where people went. Evaluate the test. Provide feedback on what worked, what didn't work, what didn't seem real, what would they like to see happen as a result of it. What are the lessons learned? What do we now know that wait a minute, the paging system doesn't reach everywhere. We have gaps in our cell phone coverage. We need to have a bullhorn or speaker system to be able to communicate. How do we resolve those in that area? As you go through, and if you're doing this with your team, my recommendation is go to each person and have them tell you one thing that they learned, or one thing that they were concerned about, or one thing that didn't work, and then move to the next. You don't want to have one person dominate the feedback area. You want this to become a conversation. Also, it's great to have a scribe there, someone who's taking down all of that information as you go forward. You'll notice that note line with issues of command and control, coordination and communications. That's where you're going to find breakdowns in a live event. And so analyzing how you did in those areas with the exercise that you ran will give you that insight. In fact, it may well be that you would like to have an outside facilitator come to help monitor what's going on during the exercise and then to lead this discussion. If that's something you'd like Firestorm to help you with, we would certainly be glad to do that. So each function that you have, whether it's the faculty, whether it's the office staff, whether it's the head of your incident response or your crisis management, you want to get them to report on what their functional group did and how those came together. So that's done immediately after the exercise. As you collect that information, then we would recommend that you create a report back to the school. You'd share that with your head of school and your key leaders of what occurred during the exercise so that you have a much better understanding of those events. So it's an analysis then that says, did we meet the objectives? We're going to lay out here our specific objectives. Did we do that? Did we not? Was it a valid test exercise? Did we have corrective actions to address the problems? Have those now been put in place? What are those corrective actions? And what were the gaps that were in our plan? Proposed modifications to the plan and recommendations for future tests. Now, one of the big benefits of the Georgia Independent School Association is that we're all in this together. And so one of the things that you might want to do is to find a neighboring school in your area and attend one of their exercises and then invite them to attend one of your exercises, each providing an independent insight in terms of what it looks like to them. What did they see that worked? What did they not see that worked? And that cooperation, that mutual aid aspect, will be an important element associated with it, because bringing in that other school leader or another couple of individuals from the school, they don't necessarily know all the personalities in your school. They're not fully aware of the other activities that have occurred, and that fresh look and fresh insight will provide you a different perspective that you might not have otherwise seen. So what I'd like to do now is to just show you a variety of different exercises and step you through how these things look when you sit down and go through them with your team. Now, I intentionally did not select school-specific exercises because I want you to work in the adaptation of what you're seeing into your environment. So if we were doing a test exercise, you pick a date, and here's some incidents that would occur. And obviously, everybody knows it's an exercise as you go through it. But the learning here is that in the real life, things don't come labeled as they were. And so you're going to have to sort through things that matter and things that do not matter as those events uncurl. Now, we talked about setting up objectives. Here are, for this particular exercise, 5 objectives that this organization wanted to have in place. They wanted to validate and understand the monitoring process for a crisis situation, identifying that it was occurring, what the extent was. So they had a monitoring process and how they monitored and carried forward, and wanted to validate that it was incorrect. They wanted to make sure they understood all of the impacts on employees, customers, senior management, board members, and the public at each phase. And our scenario with schools, we want to be focusing on what's the impact on students from this crisis, on our teachers, on our parents, on our community. Understand how we communicate throughout each of the phases and escalations. Initially, our communication may be to do a shelter in place or a lockdown, or it may be to evacuate. The next level of communication may well be around issues. Have we accounted for everyone? Do we know where everyone is? The next level of communication could be with the parents to inform them of what's happening. And then how do we coordinate reunification? And by the way, one of the big common gaps we've seen in the assessments we've been doing on schools is that they haven't thought through the reunification plan. I mentioned earlier the student who poured the flammable liquid on themselves in Colorado yesterday. And the fire resulted, the teacher put the fire out. They carried the student to the hospital, but there was smoke and obviously confusion at the school. So they suspended school and took the students from that school to a junior high to coordinate reunifying them with their parents. Where will you go to have parents find their children if they cannot do it at your school? That's an issue that you want to plan for now and not try to figure it out on the day of the event as it's occurring. Then the other objective here is to determine how we adjust our response and recovery. Those two words are very different. Respond is what we're doing right at the incident that the crisis is occurring, right at the event that we're concerned about it. How do we respond to that? And then how do we get back into school, start classes back up, and recovery? Now, we talk about schools in terms of continuity of operations plans and how we get our school back up and running. You could use the same term that industry does, and that's business continuity. You're in the business of educating children. How will you deal with that if something has happened to your facility, and how did this exercise give that indication? And then finally, how do we improve? So in this particular exercise that you're going to see, those were the objectives that were laid out to all the participants up front. And this was done as a tabletop. Then we gave assumptions and instructions that it was understand on the plans, make your best decision, draw a ton upon your understanding. And it didn't and there was no negative impact back. So if you did something wrong or said something wrong, no one's going to be angry or upset, or it won't be held against you. And clearly the last one, that there's not a predetermined solution. We always want to stress we're here to do the best that we can, and we'll carry through and see how the events develop. So now we set the stage to take your teachers through and your staff through an exercise. And we give them very clear goals, as we've seen those things here. Look at the last one on this list. We want them to use the plan. So they should have their plans, have access to their plans, and when in doubt, you want to refer them back to the plan that's been written. When in doubt, you want to refer them back to the plan that's been written. If the plan's only in people's heads, if the plan isn't documented, if the plan isn't tested, then when it really matters most, you're not going to get the optimum performance. So use the exercise to create familiarization with the plan as we go forward. So here's some background information on this particular event. And here's the school, here's the setting, here's the geographic location, and the description that would need to be done. So you can set a scenario with your school in terms of what's going on, where you're located, to provide that framework. Now, as we go in real life, unfortunately, there's not someone that says update, but as we go through an exercise, there'll be a series of escalations. And it starts out, and in this particular one, there was an alarm sounding, uncertain origin, confusion. 911 is called by multiple parties. A minute later, the sprinklers are triggered. People are seen running. Reports vary on description, location, and severity. Security notified to dispatch to the building. This was a college campus event. More escalation. Confusion continues. Activity is centered on the warehouse area. People are running and crying. Phone videos of confusion and panic shared. Bomb blasts mentioned in text messages. Okay, what do you know? Well, we know we've got panic. We know we've got confusion. There's some reference to a bomb blast. Alarms are going off. People are running. So as you're doing this and you're facilitating this exercise with your team, you will say, tell me one thing you know. Now, one of the things that generally happens at this point in time is someone will tell you something they think. And you want to stop and say, we don't know that, we think it. And if they're missing some of the areas, then you can always go back and point out that panic is, they miss panic. Panic is here. We all know that if panic starts, it's going to spread. And your goal here is to have a discussion on these topics with them as you go forward. Then after you've established what you know, you ask them if they're concerned. Generally, everyone says yes at this point, but then you want to say, what are you very specific? Well, that we may have missing children. We may have people that are hurt. There may well still be someone on site with ill intent. What is it that they're concerned about? Okay, and now then you focus on what is the plan for each one of the things that they're concerned about. What are their actions? If they have their plan there, you can say, what does it tell us in our plan? Where is the detail associated with it? Now, we've already shared earlier on a webinar when we talked about plans that the plan needs to show you how to do things, not just what to do. There's a difference between what and how. And your plans need to be that granular that you explain that. And so you're tying them back into what they say and is this documented, and then continue to what are they going to monitor as the process continues to escalate. Because remember what we said earlier, most everything you learn initially is wrong in a disaster or a crisis. So now if you've had that discussion, and generally, as you could see, going through the slides, talking about the escalation that's occurring takes 5 minutes or so, or even less. The discussion there, you want to try to have that run 10 to 20 minutes. If it's starting to slow down, then it's, at that point, then you can move to the next update. If the discussion is good and you're gaining some good insight and progress, then having it run 15 to 20 minutes is good. Now, the reason why we say this could last an hour or two is if you're doing 4 interventions and they're each 15 minutes long, that's an hour alone just with each of those. With the setup and the wrap-up afterwards, you probably are in an hour and a half. If you're running 20 minutes each, then you're closer to a 2-hour window to do this tabletop exercise. Now you come back and you have the escalation. 911 is called, fire and police are dispatched, more reports of explosion in industries, confusion, notice to evacuate the building given, 12:05, screens heard, security arrives, debris and widespread damage, injured seen by security, paramedics dispatched, lab isolated by security, chaos. Now what's changed? Obviously the events have continued, and you would then have people describe these events that you're seeing on the screen from their memory, from what they've heard. And remember, one of the things that we learn in a crisis is you're going to lose command and control of your facility. When the police and the first responders come, they will be in control of that aspect of it. So having plans, have everybody clearly understood where we're going to go, what we're going to do, and how to coordinate will make a difference. So the first thing you do is you ask them what's changed from the first phase. Have them describe that, and so that it would be very clear. Then talk about what else that we know at this point. And then the concern, if so, about what? What's your plan, and what are you going to monitor? So this process you would repeat through the 4 escalations. 4 is generally a good number. You could do 3, but we have found that consistently around 4 escalations of events, adding increasing complexity to each one really takes your team together to understand what they need to do and coming along. Now, you'll notice here, this phase 2, here are more specific questions. These questions are very general. You let the group come through. Now, we talked about the types of exercises earlier in some of the goals, but you could see here are much more direct questions that you could have asked. Are the employees trained? Does your site emergency and plan include an active shooter response? Which departments have a role? How do you control access to the site? Should you deactivate card readers? How do you manage employees? Are the critical phones getting through to security? How do you prevent models, prevent media and others from entering the site? So you can craft more specific questions if there's a key element or step or two that you want to test in your plan. What my general recommendation is, the first exercises that you do, you keep at this higher level. Then as you continue that along, then you can go into a much more granular, more tactical details that would come through to test your plans. So this is an example of where we're adding complexity, as we talked about earlier through the process in testing your plans. Now, I want to take you to a completely different scenario. This is not associated with the one that you just saw, but it's a different approach and one that you might well think that you need to spend time on. As an independent school, you have a board, you have directors that would be involved, and I would recommend that you do at least one exercise with your board to let them see how decisions are being made and what's occurring within it. So I picked a business scenario here where they ran into difficulty with their supply chain. Supply chain failure is the largest single failure in a disaster or a crisis. But you could do another type of an exercise that would impact the school. We talked about the cruise lines and the communicable illness. If suddenly there's an outbreak of communicable illness and you have to suspend classes or the school cannot reopen for the year, are you going to refund tuition? What's the policy? What's the plan? How do those elements work within it? Those are types of decisions that ultimately could come back to the board. And having documentation that your board participated in an exercise is a great way to help reinforce the coverage under your current directors and officers insurance. So you read the background that's on the screen while I was talking, that there was a shortage of the key product here. The foam takes up a lot of space, the inventories are minimal associated, and each one of their products had a different mix. So here's the update. Key supplier of the foam says they can only provide half of what was normally expected in the foam area. All 4 of the suppliers have been impacted by recent hurricanes. By the way, this scenario that you're seeing here is an actual event that occurred and affected a company that was involved. The foam, they sustained damage as a result of the tornado. They have only a minimal inventory of the product. Now, going through, we would ask each one of those same questions as we had done earlier, but in stepping through, you can see the situations would be different in this type of a business impact or an impact on the operational aspect of your school so the leaderships could participate in it. But as you're going through with it, in any of the exercises that you would do, I would direct you down to that item 4 that you see there. What are your top priorities at this point? Can you identify, here's an action that we want to take, here's what we need to address, here's where the gap occurred. I always want to keep the focus on what are the impacts. And if you're trying to do a summary of, clearly having everyone that's involved in the exercise to talk about what are the impacts on our students, what are the impacts on our parents, what's the impact on our faculty and staff, because they were directly involved in whatever occurred, just as those that were injured or hurt associated with it, and in that debrief aspect of it. So what we've done is to try to build an awareness with you of predict, plan, perform. Predict, understand the vulnerabilities and threats, what are their impacts, how do you monitor and what are the triggers. The key element here would work under predict in an actual crisis if you were trying to make decisions. This has occurred, what do you think will happen the next. You have to do that prediction so that you can include that in your planning on the fly as you're moving forward. The more things that we have identified in the detail of our plans, the less of that we're going to have to create under that stress. But establishing those things are something that we would like to think through every time in advance. Now, the plans are workplace violence, communicable illness, preparedness, bullying, fire, tornado, earthquake, depending upon the geographic regions that are associated with it. You're all focused now on plans for winter storms and making sure that your students are safe at this point today. So making sure that those things are documented, that they show the how and not just the what associated with it. And then the perform is what we've been talking about today through our discussion. Have we done an exercise? Have we trained our people on our plans? Have we monitored the correct areas? Unfortunately, social media today is a significant change from the time all of us went to school. When we look at that, information is available via social media. It's that intelligence we want to craft into our plan so that as we have to adjust, we have those capabilities to make sure we address key issues that arise. The student, unfortunately, that tried to commit suicide this week in Jefferson County apparently had indicated that to others via social media. If you do not have a social media risk program in place in your school with detailed monitoring occurring, and that's more than a Google search, it's more than looking at your school Facebook, it's understanding what's out there and where those information sources are, you're going to find that things will be occurring and you won't be aware of it. Leakage is a term that's associated with that. Statistically, at least 2 people in the school are aware of what's going on. They've told a friend, someone has overheard something, someone has seen something. So we want to create an environment where that information is safe and coming forward. So as you think about these exercises, you want to create a scenarios so that whether it's anonymous reporting or otherwise, information would flow through and carry forward. Taking the types of exercises we've seen and including elements in social media that could have occurred, and then someone saying, well, how would we have known that? Where would we have found it? Now you're going to be increasing awareness of those levels, and that will change your ability to perform. So the Georgia Independent School Association, CPIL, I can actually say that name, and Firestorm are working on this webinar series to continue to address these types of things. We've laid out an editorial calendar. If there are topics that you would like to see have added into this series, let Candy know. We'll be glad to work them in. We will be doing topics around threat assessment a little later this year and working through those. We'll also be doing another topic around reunification because those are areas that we've seen that would be of help to you. But if there are other topics you'd like to know more about, let us know. If you haven't had a chance to do the preparedness assessment, I would encourage you to do so. It'll take about an hour. We'll look at 8 different dimensions and approximately 5 data points in each of those around preparedness. And that this self-assessment is at no cost to you. The cost of that's been underwritten by the Georgia Independent School Association. If you have not done so, I would encourage you to do it. Then about a week afterwards, there would be another phone call with you to walk through the results orally. Then you'd receive the written report, and then a follow-up call to address any issues that you would like to carry forward. So I think this is a great way to understand where you are, to know where you need, how you're going to get to where you need to within the process. You can request it via our website. We'll try to reach out to everyone on our call today and share that information with you. So I'd like to thank Candy and the Georgia Independent School Association today for sharing with us on all the topics. And I'd like to see if there are any questions that have come in, Bill, or comments that we can further clarify. And if not, we're going to let everybody get back to watching the weather and seeing if we need to close early today. So
There
Bill,
are
do we have any questions?
no questions at this point. If you have something, please type it into the question facility as soon as you can. Otherwise, we're going to keep our eye on the weather.
And so for those
Jim
of you
and Bill, I want to say thank you to Firestorm and Jim and Bill for this presentation, and to our member schools who joined in on such pertinent and information and so timely with us. So important for this to be taken care of in your school situations. And Jim and Bill, once again, thank you so much, and everybody stay warm and safe.
And if let others know that may have wanted to hear today and were closed early for school, this webinar has been recorded so that they can view it and listen. They can go to firestorm.com/GISA, and they'll find a recording. It'll be up a little later today, so they'll have direct access to it. Thank you again for everyone, and thank you for what you do in your school to educate our children, help them grow, and keep them safe. Preparedness is a culture that we all are involved and committed toward, and we're looking for ways to continually improve it. Thanks, and have a wonderful day, and good luck at the meeting Thursday. Candy, I certainly hope the weather allows you to hold that event.
Thank you.
Okay.
Talk to everyone later.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye all.